starting. So we start fresh. Cool. I think we're live. All right.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Cool. Welcome to the first ever Background Agent Summit. I'm Philipp, COO at Ona, and with me I have Will, who leads product enablement, also here at Ona. We'll be your hosts for the next 2 days that are pretty talk-packed, honestly. I wish we were doing this in person, but for this one, we're staying virtual. The next one, maybe in person, who knows? But we have 14 speakers from companies like Stripe, Uber, Harvey, Cloudflare, Monzo, amazing companies, and many more. And we're going to dive really, really deep into a wide array of topics, all around background agents, though, and software factories. And we're quite excited to dive in. But before we start, a couple of words on how we actually got here. So we're Ona, we're the platform for background agents to run fleets of agents in the cloud, all governed and secured at the kernel. And we're usually working with many large enterprises and also more tech-forward companies. So we've been at it for quite a while. But a couple of months ago, we launched a microsite called backgroundagents.com. The intention was really to level set and help everybody get educated on the right primitives that are required for agentic software engineering. And as we were doing that, we were obviously looking at the industry leaders and the ones that were quite public about it. So, for example, Stripe and Ramp. And as we were publishing this, we received a lot of questions from folks on how to actually get there. They were like, cool that these companies can do this, but how can I also make sure I get there? So we thought, let's bring all those teams together, kind of give these pioneers a platform to share their experiences live and also their journeys, the architectural decisions behind that, and also the organizational challenges that they have overcome to roll these things out. And I think it's also quite important to talk about that because the pace at which AI is moving in software engineering is insane. So every day when I'm opening X, you already feel like you're behind. And that creates a kind of a big gap between the leaders like, Stripe, etc., and then the laggards who are just trying to keep up. And that gap creates uncertainty. And we're like hearing from that all the time. So the goal really over the next 2 days is that we're giving you an honest view of what works and what's still hard. And I can tell you from the prep calls that, even for these like super tech forward companies that seemingly have figured it all out, there are still issues there. There's still, quite gnarly things they have to figure out. So don't expect clickbaity stories like you always read on X. Like we're really here to try to give you the honest lay of the land, basically. The goal is to make it tangible and work for you no matter what stage you're currently in. All right. So to get there, let's first start with some basics, and we'll have a question for you. So we've seen this type of promise before, and people are posting on X all the time about their insane productivity gains, especially with local coding agents like Claude Code, etc. So my question is, if everybody's shipping so much faster now, why do we still hear that on an organizational level the gains aren't that obvious?
Yeah, thanks, Philip. That's kind of the question of the day. And it's been the question of the day for a few days. We've been thinking about this for a while now. And if you've read the Background Agents microsite, you've probably seen this graphic, and it's a familiar concept. We've been calling coding agents a false summit, or at least in the way that they're implemented today, right? The promise originally was massive. You can ship faster than ever before by giving LLMs a way to act on your behalf on your laptop. And give this LLM intelligence, give it the ability to access your tools, and then just prompt it away. And yes, it did make us faster and, broadly speaking, more capable as developers, but faster code generation on its own didn't automatically create faster organizations. And the reason behind that is pretty simple. Human attention and the time on your physical laptop is still the cap. So you've all probably seen this meme floating around Twitter. Engineers walking around with their laptops open while their local agents are shipping away. You've seen guys like Gary Tan, so on, like carrying around their laptops at conferences, just slightly cracked open.
There was one guy holding his laptop on his bike on his way back home because he, I think Codex needed to finish a task or something.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I mean, even when agents are able to generate code, they're still limited to your physical laptop, right? Your person still has to be there, prompting, approving tool calls, reviewing, handing off, recontextualizing, and ultimately pushing that work forward, because the agent requires attention and a machine. So we've improved one system of the software development lifecycle, and the bottleneck itself kind of shifted from writing code to doing code review and merging and approving tool calls on your laptop and things like that. So going from like this whack-a-mole mode where we are on our machines pressing tab, it still wound up hitting that same ceiling. Now, background agents, where we're kind of heading today, are designed first to make this problem go away, but then in a wider organization, they can have a much bigger effect. So this concept of background agents isn't new. It's gone by a lot of different names. People have called them headless agents, cloud agents, whatever. But as we've documented on the website, a key pattern of primitives are emerging that make up this concept of background agents. They take the primitive of a coding agent and move it off the individual laptop and into an ephemeral development environment, and then couple it with a bunch of other primitives, right? A coding harness that can call powerful tools and extend the LLM's capabilities within that development environment. A secure sandboxing strategy to make sure that work and state are persisted, but not in a way that's potentially destructive. Making sure that all of the tools and access to all those tools themselves are automatically provisioned. And we're kind of moving into this world of context engineering and governance and fleet coordination. Now, once all of those primitives are in place, the engineers and team leads in an organization can start moving forward by eliminating the bottleneck of human initiation and human steering. Because these agents are working in such, a different type of environment where the work is persistent but not destructive, agents can run for longer periods of time on automated workflows and do things completely in the background, allowing you to connect up these agents to triggers that do things automatically within your SDLC. And this is kind of where things go into the future, right? Once you've hooked up a background agent, which is basically, an AI-powered software engineer with a virtual laptop in your cloud, once you've hooked that up to things like Slack, Linear, GitHub, whatever, all your different tools, you now have a way to parallelize your own work and move from being in the loop to being on the loop, which multiplies your output without just shifting the bottleneck around. This completely changes the model from humans copy and pasting into chatbots to humans prompting and steering agents, which is in this kind of second stage, to humans designing and approving systems that can execute work end to end. And we'll see this from all of our speakers here today, right? The fundamental tech is unlocking an incredible amount of productivity. And it's going so far now that we're starting to see fundamental changes in the way that the SDLC works. So this technology lets us orchestrate multiple tasks at once without worrying about breaking our dev machine or having conflicts in work trees, that type of thing. And going from code generation and steering your agent locally to building out background agents kind of takes everything and recontextualizes it. So this next shift that we're trying to help solidify over the course of these next 2 days, but also like open up a lot of questions into Pandora's box about this, is this concept of the software factory, right? Going from on the loop to having fully autonomous loops, having humans define the inputs and outputs of your SDLC, taking all of the things like the toil heavy, high friction stuff in your SDLC, like CVE remediation, code review, merge conflicts, architecture and docs, things like that, and turning it into fully automated workflows end to end. Obviously, this is super early. Very few companies have implemented it, and very few have implemented it well. But the concept of a factory is not necessarily something new, and the concept of a factory is something that we believe will kind of stick around, right? The factories of the 1800s look nothing like the factories of today, but they're still factories, right? We have 6-axis robots now instead of steam-powered hammers. But the thesis of it is still the same. Engineers design the products, define the systems, and fix the issues with the end goal of shipping more, faster, and at a higher quality. So we're starting to kind of rethink where humans stay in the loop, where they move on the loop, and what work can happen fully autonomously with them out of the loop. So Philipp, this kind of brings up a question, right? If that's the direction that things are moving in, what approaches can teams start to take to actually get there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's actually exactly what we will be learning from the folks who figured it out over the next 2 days. There are some patterns emerging, though, which we've kind of bucketed into 3 different pillars. So one is the infrastructure, and then also the architecture of that infrastructure. The second is security, and the third one is leadership, or like, the organizational transformation, basically. So infrastructure really spans what you already said, like sandboxes, coding harnesses, the orchestration engine, and provisioning the access to the agents. And the security side of things is really making sure that your sandboxes are secure and that the guardrails can actually be enforced, right? So today we'll hear from Steve at Nono and Leo, Lorenzo, and Chris from ONA about how to enforce that even at runtime. So the other thing is, I think people often underestimate this and assume it's a purely technical challenge. And obviously, like, the foundation is quite technical, right? And you need to figure that out first before you can roll out anything. But once you have a system where background agents can actually operate across the SDLC, this shift goes like far beyond the tooling or the tech. So if you think about it and think back to the slide that you just showed, today's SDLC is really built around humans typing in code by hand. With that going away, as you said, the role of the human also shifts from being in the loop to on the loop, and then eventually in the factory, like outside of the loop, right? So planning becomes specification. The quality of what you really put in is the context, the constraints directly determines the quality of the output that comes out. Today we have Patrick Dubois from Tesla, who talks about context being the new code and how this kind of deserves the same engineering rigor, which I'm excited about. The other thing that changes is like implementation kind of becomes delegation, or like orchestration, if you will. So you're not writing the code, you're steering agents to decompose the work. And you also have to define clear acceptance criteria, right? Because if you don't, then like, how will you control what the agent's doing? You're still in the loop again. You're the bottleneck. Testing becomes governance. Instead of you writing the tests, you declare the standards. Review becomes triage. So what we're also seeing is that, a lot of you probably have seen this too, review becomes the new bottleneck after code generation is solved. So how do we decide like what agent PRs you're actually reviewing, which ones can be auto-approved and others that need to be escalated for review by a human? So we have Stripe talking about how they're shipping over 1,000 PRs every week using that workflow, which will be exciting. And then one where I'm particularly excited about, because I think it's still a bit overlooked, is think of application engineering almost becoming harness engineering, right? So the harness is like everything that makes up the system. So teams will really build the factory, identify the bottlenecks, and optimize for throughput so that you're not stuck in like another stage of the SDLC. And once you figure that out, like this is ultimately how you scale autonomy without the operational chaos behind it. The other thing that will never go away, I don't know, never, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon, is taste and good judgment, which will be even more important now from humans. And the other thing that we're hearing about today is rolling out background agents across the SDLC also requires leadership. It requires enablement. You know that more than anyone else. And really like shared workflows that reduce the friction. What we're also hearing is successful teams start quite narrow. They build trust and then they expand on it. And it's really important, because if your teams don't trust the system, like it can be as good as you want it to be, like the adoption usually stalls, right? So this is a really, really critical point that I think is often overlooked. And a lot of our speakers will actually share how they navigated the rollout, how they got the buy-in internally, how they sequenced this, and also what they would do differently if they were to do it all again. So those primitives matter just as much as the adoption itself, the change management, and rethinking basically how your team operates. So in a nutshell, that's essentially the purpose of the summit, bringing in the people who've done it. And the question that we really want to answer is like, what are the real use cases? Like, don't show us demos, but really talk about only the production workloads that you're running today. What patterns are emerging? What's really working? What's still hard? And how do you successfully roll out such a change? with all that said, let's really get into it. So as I said, we have 2 days which are jam-packed with great talks. You'll be hearing from the superstars in the industry here. Day 1, in a nutshell, is basically around the foundations, right? What does it actually take to get this done from an infrastructural point of view, security, architectural perspective? And then day 2 is more about the human side, but we also talk about, software factory as a concept. So pretty excited about both those days. And now I'm really excited to get started with the first session of the day, which will be Stripe with Alistair Gray, who built Minions. And the session will be hosted by our own Lou, who is field CTO at ONA. And I'm excited to get going.
All right, let's get this started.